Just in the last week, there's been two major news stories to do with Andrew and Sarah. So just take us through the two of them. So one of them was in the Times, and this was about Andrew reaching out to the Crown Prince of Bahrain about them setting up an investment vehicle and potentially buying the commercial arm of pitch at the Palace. And there was also a further report last week about Sarah Ferguson's involvement with an app, a chap called Manuel Fernandez. And they have been romantically linked in some reports previously, but essentially he raised millions of pounds for an app which then never appeared, including £1 million of taxpayers' money. So just take us through some of those reports that are coming out recently.
The Manuel Fernandez story is interesting. I actually contacted him. I mean, he decided not to cooperate with the book, but as you say, they were romantically linked for a time. She invested in his company, and it was an app which, seemed a good idea at the time. I hadn't realized when I wrote the book that there was government money involved. But clearly, all these people are sort of entrepreneurs, but not very good entrepreneurs, and things, of course, fail. But he's disappeared. And there was an awful lot. I think also with Gate Ventures, there was money that Gate Ventures, which Sarah was involved in, which was basically money from Chinese investors, which was meant to be for a theatre company. Some of that money was also put into Fernandez company. So I think they were sort of taking money. I mean, certainly what seems to have happened, Sarah Ferguson was taking money from investors and then using this money to put into other businesses like her boyfriend's. And, it might have worked and they might have got their money back. But it does seem there's an awful lot of instances where she goes out to get money from people. There's a case also with Serenity Books, an Australian publisher, where they were trying to get money, investors in on a business model that really wasn't sustainable to support her book publishing, children's book publishing. So it's just another indication of her sort of business activities. Again, the story of Andrew and Bahrain is very interesting. It shows the close links there are there. It shows that he was continuing to use Picture Palace as a sort of tool to exploit markets. We knew that was happening in China and suspected it was happening in the Middle East. And of course, now that Andrew is no longer a member of the royal family, it's going to be much more difficult to scrutinize him. I mean, there are no grounds, for example, to put him on a royal register. I think he's going to go full out to try and make some money, but particularly in places like the Middle East, where he's still a respected figure, I say very close to the Bahraini royal family. And so I think we're going to get more of these stories. But certainly, I was talking to someone, one of my sources in Bahrain yesterday, and he was intrigued by the sort of business practices that are going on. He says that they're always using kind of people on the edge rather than proper advisors operating through proper banks. I think one of the important elements to this whole story is Bank Haviland, owned by Andrew's friend David Rowlands, which specializes in high net individuals who might not get normal banking facilities elsewhere. We know that Andrew was involved in getting a banking license for them in the Middle East fast-tracked through contacts that he had. And so I think, and of course, Bank Haviland itself has been surrounded by scandal, and I think is actually banned from operating in Europe now because of some of its activities. So the whole thing has a sort of odd stench about it. All these business activities are not what you expect from members of the royal family. A pitch at the palace, the only director left was a man called Arthur Lanchester, who was working for Baroness Mohn. And Lanchester has many times been criticized for his, shall we say, flouting of tax regulations. I think Tax Watch have got him very much on speed dial. So it doesn't seem like they're cleaning up their act. It seems like they're actually just digging themselves deeper into these, I would say, rather suspicious business dealings.
And talking of bankers, that brings us to Harry Keogh, who worked for Coots, and he was fired from Coots for being quote unquote a sex pest, allegations of groping against younger female colleagues. And he was actually invited, still invited, to Eugenie's wedding months after having been fired for groping. And then he was tasked by Andrew to set up this potential trust fund for the princesses, which ended up being abandoned because it was too dodgy even for Andrew. And I suppose that also brings me to people like Peter Nygaard, who Andrew also was more than happy for his children to spend time with. So there's an interesting pattern here, isn't there? Whether it's Epstein, whether it's Peter Nygaard, whether it's Harry Keogh, Andrew doesn't seem to have any problem with people who have been accused of sexual improprieties being in the same room as his children.
No, he doesn't. And I mean, one could add a whole series of other people. P. Diddy was someone that Sarah Ferguson was taking the children to sort of party with. It is very odd. I mean, the children are very, I mean, I think members of the public are pretty aware of the close links the children have with the parents' own business activities. There's a lot of criticism of them at the moment. I mean, the line is they should basically stop those activities because they're going to cause reputational damage. And they're refusing to have a sort of ethics audit of their business activities. I think one of their selling points clearly in the Middle East is the fact they are still princesses, and I don't think they're going to surrender those very easily. But yeah, I mean, I think it was almost immediately after Epstein came out of prison, Sarah took the girls to meet him. So they don't seem to have any concerns about this, which is odd because both parents, in fact, the children, are deeply involved with anti-slavery charities. I mean, Andrew was a patron of the NC, I can never pronounce it, National Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, a patron with Peter Mandelson. Sarah's a whole series of charities that she's worked with. Andrew had a charity dealing with trafficked women in India and selling their products through the Body Shop, which only lasted about a year. Eugenie has her anti-slavery collective, which is collecting a lot of money but doesn't seem to spend it. And the suspicion is that, these things are all there for reputational laundering rather than for any genuine interest in the subject. So, yeah, it is weird. You would think that they would cut loose from these people immediately they discovered, what their background was. And Nigar is I can't remember where quite he is at the moment, whether he's in prison or not. But I mean, he has a long history, and he's just a very bizarre character. And to go and bring your children to his property in the Bahamas as they did does seem very surprising.